Senate will come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we are led in prayer by the senator from Wyoming. Please remain standing after the prayer as the senator from Mercer leads us in reciting the pledge. Senator.
Thank you. Let's bow our heads, please. Almighty God in heaven, watch over us today and let this Senate do what is good for the people of West Virginia. And may God bless the United States, the state of West Virginia, and all of us in the Senate. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would everyone in the chamber and the gallery please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, March 10th, 2021. The Senate met at 11:02 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President, in the chair.
The senator from Tucker requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? The chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction of guest. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure and yours to introduce our doctor of the day. In the rear of the chamber today, we have Dr. Gina Barber. She's from KANAWHA, West Virginia, finishing her third year of family medicine at Marshall University. Plans to stay here in West Virginia, so that always makes me happy when our homegrown stays with us. If the Senate wouldn't mind giving her a warm welcome.
Further introductions. Senator from BROOKE.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joining us in our virtual audience today is Ann Kegler. Ann is a Redcoat volunteer with the ARP as part of their Executive Council and Capital Advocacy team. Usually we see them here in the building. They are familiar to us. And so this year they've got all their advocates watching the legislative session. I spoke with Ann earlier today, and she is a geriatric social worker in Ohio County where she lives and has been doing that for 45 years. And so she started that job when she was 10, she told me. And the thing that she enjoys the most about being a volunteer with the ARP is interacting with legislators and learning more about the process and how she can help seniors around the state. So if everybody would welcome Ann Kegler in our virtual audience.
Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced that the House amended and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 216, authorizing Department of Commerce to promulgate legislative rules.
The message will be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 216.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 216. Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The House strike and insert amendment to the committee substitute, it did a couple things. One, added the Division of Rehab Services rule. That was Ron Yost Personal Assistance Services Act Board to the bill. It had been placed in the wrong bundle, and this was just a correction. It also deleted subdivision 4.18.3 from the Department of Commerce rule, which was tourism development districts, which required that an applicant must file one or more documents showing that the land use was planned and was rejected by the land use officials. I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the Senate concur with the House amendment to Senate Bill 216. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the motion adopted. The question is now on passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. On this question, 29 yeas, 0 nays, 5 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those having elected and voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
The senior senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent the roll call used on passage of the bill to be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 29 yeas, 0 nays, 5 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
The House amended and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 272 relating to West Virginia Employment Law Worker Classification Act.
The message will be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 272.
The senior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 272. Is there discussion? Senior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of the bill is to provide consistency and clarity in the distinction between employers and independent contractors under West Virginia law. The House amendment clarifies that the term direct sellers under Section 3508, subsection B2 of the Internal Revenue Code are independent contractors. The House amendment also provides an alternate method of classifying employees as independent contractors. Workers who do not meet the test for an independent contractor under the bill may instead be classified pursuant to the IRS 20-factor test. The House amendment further clarifies that requiring the use of safety equipment or undergoing safety training is not to be considered when determining whether the principal controls the work of the agent. Mr. President, the House amendment further clarifies the application of the independent contractor standard. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the Senate concur with the House amendments to Senate Bill 272. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the motion adopted. The question now is on passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 19 yeas, 10 nays, 5 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
The House amended and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 277, creating COVID-19 Jobs Protection Act.
The message will be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 277.
The senior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate concur with the House amendments to Senate Bill 277. Is there discussion? Senior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr.
Senior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of this bill is to prohibit civil actions for loss, personal injury, or death arising from COVID-19. The House amendment clarifies that the legislation would not prohibit impacted care claims unrelated to COVID-19. It provides a procedure where, if the COVID-19 affirmative defense is raised by a defendant, the court will stay the proceedings and hold a hearing to determine whether the impact to care was, in fact, related to COVID-19 or the COVID-19 emergency. The House amendment also establishes an exception to the immunity for actions which are intentional and with malice. Finally, the House amendment makes technical corrections as well as amending the title. Mr. President, I urge adoption.
Is there further discussion? Junior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator from Morgan yield?
Will the senator yield? The senator will yield.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the amendment as laid out by the senator from the 17th, I just want to make sure I have a handle on what that does practically speaking. As I understand the amendment that the House made, there is a claim of impacted care to begin with before you get to the part or the rest of the amendment put forth by the House, right?
I think that's correct. In other words, the bill as it left the Senate precluded suits for malpractice if the care was impacted by COVID or the COVID-19 crisis. And what the House has done with its amendment is altered the definition of impacted care with exception.
Sure. And in addition to that exception, just so again I understand mechanically how it works, this is an affirmative defense, as I understand it, correct?
That's correct. In other words, if I were to file a medical malpractice suit against a hospital or a doctor, the defendant would have to plead as an affirmative defense. I have a defense. Our ability to provide care for the plaintiff, for this patient, was impacted by the coronavirus pandemic.
And in support of that particular defense, there would be some discovery on that particular issue, correct?
So, yes, obviously, you know, our bill didn't flesh that out as it left the Senate nearly as much as the House did. As the majority leader just mentioned, they added a whole new proviso in the definition of impacted care. And the operative language starts out with saying, provided this provision does not prohibit claims that may otherwise be brought pursuant to the State Medical Professional Liability Act, so long as such claims for loss, damage, physical injury, or death are unrelated to COVID or the COVID-19 emergency and the care provided. So that says if the care is not impacted by COVID, the claim may move forward.
Okay. And then the next step, if the defense is impacted care as raised by the defendant, the next step is that the amendment lays out is some hearing on whether or not that impacted care was related to the claim, correct?
That's the way the amendment also lays in a procedure. And it's interesting how they've done it. But the way I read this is it gets taken up first, and it says, if the issue of impacted care is raised by a defendant, the circuit court shall, upon motion by the defendant, stay the proceedings, including any discovery proceedings, and as soon as practicable, hold a hearing to determine whether the care offered, delayed, postponed, or otherwise adversely affected at a health care facility or from a provider was related to COVID or the COVID-19 emergency. So the way I read that and interpret it is that's basically the first thing you do. If somebody raises a defense and says, I have a defense to your malpractice claim against me, and my defense is that the patient's care was impacted by COVID, then I read this language as saying that gets addressed first by the circuit court.
And you would expect that when that issue is raised and a hearing is held, that the circuit court judge would take testimony from the stand, consider issues provided by both sides of the issue to see whether or not, in fact, the impacted care is related to the claim, correct?
I agree with that completely. I don't know how a judge could do it otherwise. In other words, if the court has to decide at a hearing this question up front, was the care impacted by COVID, the only way that any court could decide any factual question like that would be, taking evidence. You have to take testimony from witnesses.
Okay. All right. I appreciated that explanation. I wanted to make sure I understood it the same way you did. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is that the Senate concur with the House amendments on Senate Bill 277. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the motion adoption. The question now is on passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there are 26 yeas, 4 nays, 4 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
The senior senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? The chair hears none. On this question, 26 yeas, 4 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
The clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2674 relating to the administration of anesthetics.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
House Bill 2957 relating to the repeal of outdated code sections.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
House Bill 2958 relating to repealing outdated sections of state code.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization. Communications from the executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 318 relating generally to public notice of unclaimed property held by State Treasurer, and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute for committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric J. Tarr, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 500, prohibiting intimidation and retaliation against public officers and employees, jurors, and witnesses, and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 518 relating to grounds for administrative dissolution of certain companies, corporations, and partnerships, and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Energy, Industry, and Mining has had under consideration Senate Bill 542 relating to Public Energy Authority Act of West Virginia, and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Respectfully submitted, Randy E. Smith, Chair.
The report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2009 relating to limitations on the use of wages and agency shop fees by employers and labor organizations for political activities, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on the Workforce has had under consideration engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2290, initiating a state employment first policy to facilitate integrated employment of disabled persons, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Roland A. Roberts, Chair.
The report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 622 through Senate Bill 632 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill 622 through Senate Bill 632 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 23 by Senators Stallings and Phillips, naming the United States Marine Corps Corporal Guy Maywood Edwards Memorial Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 24 by Senator Martin, naming the U.S. Navy Specialist 1 Paul McHugh Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 19 by Senator Blair, Mr. President, reaffirming the sister state partnership between West Virginia and Taiwan.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 22, naming the Raymond Gerald Jr. Memorial Road.
The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Senate Resolution 16, amending Senate Rule 14 relating to the introduction of concurrent resolutions.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted.
Senate Resolution 18, congratulating Pocahontas County on its bicentennial.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its passage.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 18, congratulating Pocahontas County on its bicentennial.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 314, regulating pawnbrokers. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 314 amends two sections of the code. Both of them are in Article 26 of Chapter 47, which is the article that regulates and governs pawnbrokers, and it adds a new section also in that article would be designated as Section 2A. Let me start with the new section. It delineates acts that are prohibited, would prohibit certain acts by pawnbrokers. And the new language says that the new section says a pawnbroker may not purchase, accept and pawn, receive and trade, or exchange for goods. And there are 5 things. Number 1 is articles from a minor child. Number 2, articles from a person who appears to be intoxicated or under the influence of a controlled substance at the time of the transaction. Number 3, articles that the pawnbroker knows or has reason to believe are stolen. Number 4, general use prepaid gift cards, store credits, merchandise cards, gift certificates, activated phone cards, or similar items. And number 5, property on which the serial numbers are obliterated, have been intentionally altered or rendered illegible. So those are 5 items that pawnbrokers would be prohibited in engaging in the purchase of. And that's the new section. Now the amendments to the other section, Section 1 contains amendments, and that's the amendment is the bill includes a definitions of general use prepaid gift card, gift certificate. And then the other section amended is the penalty section. Current law is that a pawnbroker who violates the law in the article it's a fine between $100 and $200. This raises the fine from $250 to not more than $1,000 for each offense. And it adds a new subsection, B, which says for a third offense within a 3-year period, it's still a misdemeanor, but it's a fine of not less than $1,000, no more than $3,000, or confinement in jail for not more than 6 months, or both, fine and confinement. I will just say, Mr. President, this bill is, the committee substitutes scale back a bit from the introduced bill and scale back a little bit narrower in scope and effect than the similar bills we've had in previous years. The introduced bill had language in it about requiring cameras in certain locations in the stores and a few other items. The bill, as it comes from the committee, is narrowed from that to what I just described. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge the passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Senior Senator from the 8th, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the Judiciary Chairman for bringing this bill back up again. I think this is the 3rd or 4th year in a row that it's came before this body, and it has passed. Every time, for some reason, it gets hung up in the House. But I believe this is a piece of legislation that is needed for our citizens here in West Virginia. I've been contacted by many people about items being stolen from their property, taken to pawn shops, and I know law enforcement has been asking for this. And Mr. President, I urge passage of this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 28 yeas, 2 nays, 4 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 303, creating Local Government Labor and Consumer Marketing Regulatory Limitation Act.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. So ordered.
Senate Bill 437, extending contingent increase of tax rate on certain eligible acute care hospitals. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 493, issuing license suspensions to insurance producers and adjusters who fail to meet CE requirements. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 494, authorizing transfer of monies from Insurance Commission Fund to Workers' Compensation Old Fund. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 496, relating to punishment for second or third degree felony, second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 514, providing criteria for Natural Resource Commission appointment and compensation, second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Senate will be at ease for a moment. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to remind the members that we have some important dates coming up. On March 22nd, that will be the last day to introduce bills in the Senate. That'll be the following Monday. On March 28th, that'll be when the bills are due out of committees of their House of Origin to ensure they have full 3 days for reading. And March 31st, of course, will be the last day to consider a bill on third reading in the House of Origin. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of those dates. Thank you.
Further remarks by members. Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that we grant a leave of absence for our senators from Cabell, Wood, Greenbrier, and Randolph.
Is there objection? So ordered. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee on the Judiciary will meet this afternoon at 3:00 p.m. in the Judiciary Committee room in the West Wing, and the committee will also meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the Judiciary Committee room in the West Wing.
Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 2 p.m. in room 451M. The agenda has been posted. And also, Lucia will meet tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in room 451M, and that agenda has been posted.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m. in room 451M.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Government Organization Committee will be meeting today at 2 p.m. in room 208 in the West Wing. Also, Mr. President, the Joint Prayer Caucus will be not meeting tomorrow, but will be meeting next Tuesday at 9 a.m. in room 252M, the McManus Room. Our Senate Prayer Caucus will meet at our regular time tomorrow at 10:45 in the Senate President's Conference Room.
Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Health will meet today at 1 p.m. in 451M.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the Senate is the Senate stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned.
The House will please be in order. Those persons not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time. Members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by the gentleman of the 15th, Douglas Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord, thank you for this day that you put before us. And I come to you today to ask for your guidance and wisdom as we move forward. We've reached the halfway point of this session, and thank you for all your blessings of health and safety. Please continue that and just guide us with your wisdom as we move forward today and on through the rest of session, and bless this entire state and everyone in it. In your name, amen.
Amen. Members and guests will please remain standing as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman from the 50th, Douglas Mallow.
Delegates and friends, please join me in honoring our nation with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Wednesday, March 10th, 2021.
Laid in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Lady from the 49th, ask unanimous consent that further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. Introduction of guests. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day is Dr. Jenna Barber of KANAWHA. If the House could please make her welcome.
Reports of standing committees.
Originating in the Committee on Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse is House Bill 3079, relating to exempting recovery residences from certain standards. It's reported with the recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Originating in the Committee on Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse is House Bill 3080, relating to making the Bureau of Behavioral Health the certifying agency for recovery residences. It's reported with the recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2379, make criminal invasion of privacy a felony. It's recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
The Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2888, relating to when contentions can be revived based on forensic scientific evidence that was not available at time of conviction. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2776, creating the Air Ambulance Patient Protection Act. It's reported with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Senior, Children, and Family Issues has had under consideration House Bill 2798, relating to requiring the Health Department to mandate mucormycosis type 1 test for newborn babies, to be known as MB's Law. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Your Committee on Senior, Children, and Family Issues has had under consideration House Bill 2524, modifying the definition of child abuse or neglect to exclude accidental injury. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had in consideration House Bill 2044, establishing next generation 911 services in this state. It's reported with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Your Committee on Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services has had under consideration House Bill 2953 to clarify that counties can hire firefighters as paid staff and to modify the existing procedures to include a procedure of public hearing to commission a vote, reported with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 2345, requiring each county school board to employ at least one full-time school nurse. It's reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be reported to the Committee on Finance.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement has had under consideration House Bill 2829, providing for the amortization of annual funding deficiencies for municipal, police, or firefighter pension and relief funds, reported with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 42, creating Zombie Property Remediation Act of 2021, reported with the recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security has had under consideration House Bill 2874, extend the current Veterans Business business fee waivers to active duty military members, their spouses, and immediate family members, reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Finance has had into consideration House Bill 2493, providing valuation limitations for coal property taxation and clarifying the penalties for non-filers, reported with recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Joint Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined and found truly enrolled, and on March 10, 2021, presented to His Excellency the Governor for his action, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 11 declaring work stoppage or strike by public employees to be unlawful, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 12 relating to local health department accountability, Senate Bill 459 relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after members' death under certain circumstances, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 345 expanding alcohol test and lock program to include offenders with drug-related offense, and Senate Bill 358 removing prohibition on ATMs located in an area where racetrack video lottery machines are located.
The report will be received. Are there further reports of standing committees? If not, reports of select committees. Messages from the executive.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Hanshaw presents a communication from His Excellency the Governor advising that on March 10, 2021, he approved Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 14 and House Bill 2262.
The message will be received. Messages from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announced that the Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment, Committee Substitute for House Bill 2001 relating generally to creating the West Virginia Jump Start Savings Program.
The message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2001, as you recall, was the creation of the Jump Start Savings Account. The Senate amendment adds qualifying apprenticeship or education programs known as ACE, Advanced Career Education. It clarifies tax provisions and provides technical cleanup. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption. Or I urge we concur with the Senate amendment.
Lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on Committee Substitute for House Bill 2001. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Question now before the House is the passage of the bill. Is there discussion on the bill as amended by the House? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 97 ayes, 1 nay, and 2 members absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 2001 relating generally to creating the West Virginia Jump Start Savings Program.
Is there further title amendment? If not, the title as amended by the Senate, concurred in by the House, will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 466 relating generally to appraisal management companies.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 475 dedicating certain fees collected by Division of Labor to General Revenue Fund.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 517 relating to sunset provisions of legislative rules.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization. Are there further Senate messages? If not, resolutions.
House Resolution 14, resolution on West Virginia's energy future.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Petitions, motions, Bills introduced.
House Bill 3059, making contract consumption with state more efficient.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Unfinished business. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to take up House Bill 2598 for further consideration.
Is there objection to the request? There is no request. Clerk will report the title. Pardon me, lady from the 49th. Clerk will report the title.
House Bill 2598, altering the definition of an above-ground storage tank.
Are there amendments to the title?
Yeah. Delegate Kelly moves to amend the title. This is HFAT J. Kelly.
The question before the House is the title amendment only, on House Bill 2598. The question is, shall the title amendment be adopted? Those in favor of the title amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Is there further unfinished business? If not, bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 126, authorizing the Department of Administration to promulgate legislative rules.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? The chair hears no objection, recognizes the gentleman from the 32nd, Delegate Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a rules bundle with historic precedential value. Department of Administration Purchasing 148 CSR 01 adds a new section 15 relating to billing, which implements the purchasing division's ability to charge for contract services as permitted under Code 5A38, permits the purchasing division to take advantage of administrative fees from cooperative contracts used in connection with several states to secure lower pricing for goods and services. And here's the historic, significant part of this bill. Mine subsidence insurance, 115 CSR 1. The code requires the availability of mine subsidence insurance in a reasonable and equitable manner. The proposed rule implements a statutory requirement of 3338 that insurers licensed to sell fire insurance policies to make mine subsidence insurance available. Here's the important part. Proposed rule reduces the premiums of approximately 20% in overall reduction. This has been done pursuant to the overall claims and price history since 2016. It was determined that the rates, and these rates are set by rule for mine subsidence, that it should be reduced by 20%. So we passed this, we're reducing insurance premiums for mine subsidence. Requires insurance companies to retain subsidence waiver documentation for 5 years. Under 115 CSR 2, Public Entity Insurance Program, it sets procedure for programs of liability and property insurance for public subdivisions, charitable organizations, and emergency medical services agencies under BRIM, updates the rule to modern underwriting procedures and methods of submission of information, clarifies the manner in which producer commissions are calculated, and it updates definitions. Section 3 of that rule provides a provision regarding policy renewal, notice requirements to the producer of record regarding potential renewal, deadlines for renewal material, late submissions, fees for a late submission, and a date and time when coverage will cease for failure to submit necessary documentation required for renewal. It also provides a provision for reapplication following non-renewal with a $500 penalty. Section 4 related to service fee has been deleted. Section 5, on how a producer's commission is calculated, the current commission no more than 8% of the earned premium. The new language provides time frame for calculation and provides the 8% commission is based upon the premium paid. Language has also been added to allow for a change in the producer of record or the commission amount and the manner in which the commission is paid should there be either a producer change or modification of the commission amount. Section 6 allows the purchase of liability insurance without property insurance, but it also provides if there is a purchase of property insurance that they must also purchase liability insurance. Section 6 also provides that the board's administration costs are included in the actuarial model for determination of premium due from insured entities. Under Senate Bill, which is part of this rules bundle, Senate Bill 129, the Board of Risk and Insurance Management procedure for providing written notification of claims of potential liability to the state or its employees. The purpose of the rule was to establish a form to allow insurance entities to place BRIM on notice of potential liability of claims against the state or any of its employees. And that was due to a recent West Virginia Supreme Court decision. This is a repeal of this legislative rule, which is being changed to a procedural rule because it is a procedural matter of notifying whether a claim may be coming against the state of West Virginia or any of its employees. That is the rule and the rules bundle, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 98 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 member absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 126, authorizing Department of Administration to promulgate legislative rules.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 126 be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 98 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 member absent or not voting. 2/3 of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2671, relating to financial exploitation of elderly persons, protected persons, or incapacitated adults.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman from 32nd, Delegate Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In summary, House Bill 2671 attempts to clarify legal remedies that are available to address the financial exploitation of incapacitated adults, including civil actions, protective orders, and criminal prosecution. The proposed bill also provides technical cleanup. Section 557J1 provides that actions against any person who committed an act of financial exploitation against an elderly person, protected person, or incapacitated adult may be initiated as a civil complaint for financial exploitation, a petition for a financial exploitation protective order, or both. Subsection 2 provides that an incapacitated action may be brought in the county where the elderly person resides or where the financial exploitation occurred, and further provides that a protective order is temporary. Subsection 3 clarifies that a verified petition is required to secure a financial exploitation protective order, and further provides that notice that a full adversarial hearing is required before any relief may be granted. And subsection 4 provides the order indicating a violation may result in criminal prosecution under Chapter 61-229B. Section 55-7J-4A corrects a mistake from article in lieu of the word section. Subsection A2 inserts place in escrow. It inserts a word that was previously omitted. And subsection A5 inserts, quote, order any or all of the above, and makes technical corrections and modifications. Subsection 5C clarifies that an action under the article is civil. Subsection 6 deletes the words Section 5, referring to the terms of an order issued under Article 7J. And 61-229BE, G4, and J makes technical corrections of the code references. Section 6K A provides order must advise that the violation could result, this is in a protective order, that a violation could result in criminal prosecution and commitment penalties. Criminal charges must be brought under the auspices of the West Virginia Rules of Civil Procedure by the county prosecutor where jurisdiction lies, and the order must be issued under the West Virginia Rules of Civil Procedure or under West Virginia Code 53-7-1 through 8. A plaintiff's bond may be waived under 53-7-2. Section 6I A provides law enforcement officer may enforce the code law with a warrant or a judicial order. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Lady from the 49th, Doggett Summers.
Would the gentleman yield from the 32nd? I just had a question because when I was trying to read that, if you can file a civil complaint now, would that help? I just want to clarify this for a constituent of mine. So she couldn't file a criminal complaint because her son was on her banking account with her. So he didn't commit a crime when he took her $30,000 because, sorry, you put your child on your account. Could she now under this file a civil claim because he did drain her of all her money, or it still isn't helped in any way?
The answer is yes, she could file, or someone on her behalf could file a civil claim. Whether or not she would prevail is a different story. When there is a presumption in law that when you place someone else on your bank account as a joint account, that money is owned by either person. But there is some case law that would override that presumption, or the presumption could be overridden through facts and circumstances. But
okay.
it's the general rule is two people's on the bank account, that money belongs to both.
And I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of our elderly constituents do that, right? They put their child on their account because they're thinking, if something happens to me, this makes things easier for my entire family. But a consideration of maybe why they should not do that if there is any potential issue. But you're saying, if she filed the civil claim and she could back up where I now have no money to pay my bills, I can't get groceries, I have no funding, maybe the circumstances would have allowed her to pursue the civil route.
Yes, she could file it. Whether or not she would prevail, I would say the chances might be slim under those limited facts that you have given. But yes, I mean, you can file a lawsuit.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 96 ayes, 3 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2671, relating to financial exploitation of elderly persons, protected persons, or incapacitated adults.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2722, prohibiting the use of Class B firefighting foam for testing purposes if the foam contains a certain class of fluorinated organic chemicals.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman in the 32nd delegate fast to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of House Bill 2722 is to prohibit the use of Class B firefighting foam for testing purposes if the foam contains a certain class of fluorinated organic chemicals. The exceptions are the discharge or other use occurs in fire prevention or in response to an emergency firefighting operation, or the discharge or other use is for training or testing purposes which occurs at a facility that has implemented containment, treatment, and disposal measures to prevent uncontrolled release of the Class B firefighting foam into the environment. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 99 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2722, prohibiting the use of Class B firefighting foam for testing purposes if the foam contains a certain class of fluorinated organic chemicals.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2852, relating to distribution of the allowance for increased enrollment.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill is in response to a resolution that was adopted by the West Virginia Association of School Business Officials that were proposing the elimination of a mandated September 1st allocation of 60% of each county's projected allowance for increased enrollment. The mandated September 1st allocation requires projections of increases in enrollment to be made in August with very little hard data, and if they are too high, the county is required to return any excess funding that they receive. So the association proposed just using the single allocation on or before December 31st based on actual student enrollment increases. This bill achieves that purpose. It also includes a fail-safe provision that allows the county to receive an advance prior to the actual numbers being finalized if they request it. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 99 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2852, relating to distribution of the allowance for increased enrollment.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Ellington moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 89, exempting certain kindergarten and preschool programs offered by private schools from registration requirements.
Are there amendments? The
Committee on Education moves to amend the bill. This is H.Ed. AM number 13-8.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman of the 27th, Dr. Ellington, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the amendment does from committee was that it just inserted that out-of-school time summer recreation camps or day camp programs could be exempted. That went beyond the 30 days that was in the original code. The second part was would exempt federal Head Start programs, provided that those programs are required to continue to perform criminal background checks of all employees with a service that also includes a wrap-back system. And then the third part of that amendment was also to include all facilities or programs with the exception of programs operated by county parks and recreation commissions, boards, and municipalities. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption of the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment just explained by the gentleman from the 27th. Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares that amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 295, relating generally to economic development loans and loan insurance issued by the state.
Are there amendments?
The Committee on Finance moves to amend the bill. This is AM Fin 3-7.
There is a secondary amendment? Clerk will report the secondary amendment.
Delegate Householder moves to amend the amendment. This is HFA Householder 3-11, number 1.
The gentleman, the 64th, to explain the secondary amendment first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. In context of the secondary amendment, I would like for the members to look at the primary amendment because the secondary amendment will strike out about 5 words out of the primary amendment. But if you would look on page 1 of the primary amendment, on lines 6 through 9, it says records of the authority held from time to time by the board pursuant to this subsection that are not considered public records and that are exempt from disclosure pursuant to the provisions. So there on line 7, the secondary amendment, we are striking out the words that are not considered public records. With that, Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption.
Question before the House is the secondary amendment just explained by the gentleman, the 64th. Is there discussion on the secondary amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the secondary amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the secondary amendment adopted. The question now before the House is the primary amendment as amended. Gentleman, the 64th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the primary amendment makes technical cleanup and clarifying corrections. The primary amendment also clarifies that if the Economic Development Authority gives the Board of Treasury Investments records that are exempt from Freedom of Information Act type disclosure, then those records remain exempt from FOIA type disclosure while in the possession of the Board of Treasury Investments. I urge adoption.
Question before the House is the primary amendment. Is there discussion on the primary amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the primary amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. Chair declares the primary amendment adopted. Are there further amendments?
Delegate McGee moves to amend the bill. This is HFA McGeehan 3-11, number 1.
Does the gentleman wish to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment, I'll be brief, excuse me, will lower the threshold of loans by the Economic Development Authority and their bank guarantees from $80 million to $50 million. It's a moderate amendment. I can explain it in a little bit further detail, but I ask for the yeas and nays, and I reserve the right to close.
The question before the House is the primary amendment just explained by the gentleman from the first. Is there discussion on the amendment? The gentleman, the 64th, Delegate Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. Currently, tomorrow, this bill that you're going to be voting on, Senate Bill 295, In current code right now, we have, for broadband loan insurance, you have $10 million per provider and no more than $50 million per calendar year. The bill that you're going to be voting on tomorrow raises those caps to $20 million per provider and no more than $80 million per calendar year. There's a lot of teeth in the bill, ladies and gentlemen. For instance, the Economic Development Authority, there's specific language that says that the loan monies may not be transferred to any other fund or account or used for any other purposes other than to insure debt. So we got some teeth in the bill as far as the $80 million cap. Also, the EDA is going to require, in order to approve this loan insurance, they're going to require several things. And I'm going to read to you the list of things that's required. If you're going to be a provider of broadband in the state, you must have the financial ability of the applicant to complete the insured project and repay the loan. The EDA is going to require the credit history of the provider. They want to know the past earnings and projected cash flow of the provider. They also want to know the provider's past performance as a participant in any previous economic development program of the state or in any other state for that matter. They also want to know the provider's experience with broadband service deployment in the state or any other state. They're going to want to know the nature and value of the collateral being offered for the loan insurance. And lastly, the authority may not issue any loan insurance to a provider if the provider or parent company of the provider has previously defaulted on a debt or security instruments. So for those reasons, I reject the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman from the 27th, Doug Gearhart's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with due respect to my friend from the Finance Committee, he did a wonderful job of explaining the bill and the attributes of the bill. However, he really didn't address the amendment that's before you that simply changes one number, and it changes our potential liability from $500 million to $800 million. Now, liability. We're on the hook for loans currently in code at $500 million, approximately 10 providers, maximum of $50 million. Our potential liability currently would be $500,000. This expands it to $800 million. In 2017, this House and the other House and the governor all got together and decided to extend this $500,000 loan guarantee. In that period of time, there has not been a single loan extended for which we guaranteed. We have absolutely no experience with what is going to happen or potentially will happen with regard to these guarantees, but we still have that potential liability. Before we even have the ability to evaluate the program, before we have it even put into play for one single dollar, we're raising it 60% or approximately $300 million. The amendment does not change the initial amount, which allows these companies to be loaned twice the amount up front. So if, in fact, the companies need to get moving a little faster, it does allow that amount to be guaranteed to go quicker. This body certainly has the ability to extend the program, just like we're doing right now, over time, but we have the ability to extend the program at a later time once we can evaluate our loan experience. It just doesn't seem to me to be prudent right now to extend something that we have no idea on to the tune of about $300 million worth of liability to the state, particularly in light of recent news that we have where the state has had a similar program that we had a $25 million loss on loan guarantees. Doesn't seem to be quite the time to extend something. Wouldn't come into play until after 2.5 years or 3 years anyway, at which time we would have plenty of time and ability to evaluate the portfolio, to see what we have extended, to see whether we have bad loans out there where we're going to be liable, and to do what might be the right and proper thing to do. This doesn't cost the state a dollar today with the bill as it is or as amended, but it does leave our potential liability where it is currently and gives us the ability to update that at a later time once we have proper, prudent information in front of us to evaluate whether or not we want to put the state on the hook for an additional $300 million. Folks, I know anytime you see a bill nowadays and it says broadband, we all want to jump on board. We jumped on board in 2017 and put this into play. We all want internet access. Most of us, including myself, don't always understand what broadband means. But just because the bill refers to companies that are going to build out broadband does not mean that we need to extend $300 million worth of state liability until we have the ability to evaluate the loan portfolio that we are, in fact, for lack of a better term, co-signing. That said, Mr. Speaker, I would recommend adoption of the amendment.
The gentleman, the 16th, Doug Lim, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Finance Chairman yield? Thank you, sir. I've got the bill pulled up, and it looks like Chapter 12, 6C, 11A, it's Broadband Loan Insurance Program, and then under B2, I think is where this amendment is coming, and it says, subject to a liquidity determination and cash availability, the board shall provide a non-recourse revolving loan to the authority. That's to the Economic Development Authority, from the consolidated fund in an amount not to exceed $80 million. So the gentleman was just discussing that this could be $500 million or $800 million. Am I correct in understanding that this would be no more than $80 million guaranteed at any time?
The gentleman is correct. And to my good friend, the gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Gearhart, I really don't understand how you came up with $500 million. The cap is $80 million, okay, period. No more than $80 million per calendar year, period.
So it would appear then...
Forever.
So it would appear then that the gentleman just advocated that it would be okay if it were $500 million total?
If you want to assume that.
So we're a little more conservative leaving it at $80 million as it sits right now than even he thought that this amendment would make it.
I just want to reinstate that it's no more than $20 million per provider, no more than $80 million per calendar year, period, for the lifetime of this program, period.
Thank you to the chairman. Mr. Speaker, if I may speak to the amendment.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
All right. Let's get down to why this is actually moving to $80 million. There are loans that have been issued pursuant to the Broadband Loan Insurance Program. There are also performance bonds, which are part and parcel, and that's exactly why this bill originally was being ran, and then additional things were added to this bill to give additional protections to the Board of Treasury Investments at the request of Treasurer Moore. Now, folks, if you drop this dollar amount down to $50 million from $80 million, the reality is that the banks that are trying to loan this money, which are part and parcel and required for the pull down, the drawdown of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund dollars, which is hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal FCC, which comes, by the way, from your cell phone bills and the Universal Service Fund, okay? If you drop this and the banks pull out, they're in what's called the long-form application process. And if those banks pull out, the reality is that these long-form applications will be denied to each provider that required it. And in those areas where those providers won that have requested this loan insurance, which, by the way, we instruct in here, the non-recourse is just to the Economic Development Authority from the Treasurer's Office. But we instruct in this bill that they have to go after every means they can to recover that, including potentially repossession of the assets, right, the fiber that's being built, which we could then sell. But I digress on that. If you do that, the best case scenario is that the dollars from the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund for those census blocks go into the next round of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund auction, phase 2, and you put the builds back at least 2 years in the state of West Virginia in those areas. For those reasons, and because it appears that we would be okay with $500 million, I urge rejection.
Gentleman 30, Doug Bates. Gentleman 27, Doug Gearhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me a second bite at the apple here and my indulgence. I was present at the Finance Committee meeting hearing, and I recognize that 10 million or 20 million per provider means 10 or 20 million dollars. I also queried the gentleman from the EDA when he indicated that there were 10 providers. I did the multiplication, and $50 million times 10 equals $500 million. I am certainly not an education major here. I don't serve on the education committee, but I can do basic multiplication. $10 million or $20 million times 10 providers equals $80 million. Now, I'm not here to debate the merits of the bill. The bill is fine. The protections that are entered in the bill that we'll discuss tomorrow, if the Speaker or my friend from Huntington would like me to stand up and laud the merits of the protections that are established with the Treasury, the State Treasurer here, I'd be more than happy to do that. I think that they're good. We should have done that in 2017. When the bill was up for a vote, it passed 98-2. It passed 98-2 with my vote. I voted in favor of this. I am just not prepared to extend the liability amount by 30% with no loan experience. The program has not been utilized. In testimony from the Economic Development Authority, we have not extended a loan. However, we have 5 agreements, in the amount of $41.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, that are pending. So we have people that may be starting to utilize the program. But we don't have anything out there. We don't have any defaults because we haven't loaned or been the cosigner, if you will, for lack of a better term, on any loans. If we're going to put our neck out, then I think we probably should have a little bit of something to evaluate. And we're talking about a pretty good sum of money, 30% higher than what we approved just 4 years ago that hasn't been utilized at all. Again, Mr. Speaker, thank you for your indulgence at the second bite of the apple. I do encourage adoption of the amendment.
The gentleman from the 10th, Chris, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The $80 million was chosen because the EDA, Economic Development Authority, has already covered loan insurance for $41.5 million in broadband projects already. The balance, if we pass this bill tomorrow at the $80 million, the balance of $39.5 million is needed to cover the remaining broadband projects of the EDA that they know about. I urge rejection of the amendment.
The gentleman from the 66th, Douglas Espinosa, is recognized.
Will the chairman yield?
Yes.
As I understand this legislation, I think it really boils down to helping support the additional investment in broadband in this state. Is that essentially the underlying bill's purpose?
The gentleman is correct.
And if this amendment is adopted, as I understand the effect of the amendment, it will reduce the ability of the state to support the investment by, particularly from smaller investors, in broadband in West Virginia. Is that a correct understanding of this?
The gentleman is correct.
So if we want to help ensure that we're able to support and entice these providers to expand broadband in our state, we should reject this amendment.
The gentleman is correct.
Thank you.
The gentleman from the 34th, Douglas Boggs, is recognized.
Gentleman yield.
Yes.
To my friend the chairman, just to follow up on the gentleman from the 66th, living in a broadband challenged area, like I think most people in this room do, does this amendment that's proposed help or hurt the ability to look down the road to see more broadband deployed? Because that's what the people that I represent are interested in.
Right. The amendment's going to considerably hurt. Keep in mind, current law today is $10 million per provider, no more than $50 million annually. Okay? So what this bill tomorrow seeks to do is to raise it to 20 to 80. And as my good friend from the 10th just mentioned a couple minutes ago, the EDA has already insured $41.5 million, so we're asking for the additional $39.5 million to help communities like yours and other underserved areas of the state.
Thank you.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the chair recognizes the gentleman with the first, Doug McGann, to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Really, the core issue at stake here and what this bill really does is provide subsidies and welfare, corporate welfare, in the form of bank guarantees and sometimes the Economic Development Authority loans directly to these companies at the expense of the taxpayer. So the purpose of this amendment is to limit the exposure of the taxpayer by a significant amount by holding the line at the $50 million number instead of this explosive growth to $80 million. And yes, the gentleman from Mercer mentioned that this underlying program passed through legislation a few years ago, 98-2. Well, I can tell you I was one of the 2 no votes. And it's for good reason, because what happens to government programs once we put them on the books? They tend to get used and they tend to expand. All right, so when we pass out subsidies have a way of you tend to get more of something with subsidies, and when you subsidize costs, you tend to get more costs. Okay, so subsidies are going to bloat these private companies. You're not going to be able to achieve what the desired end is going to be able to. The desired end really is. And in the long run, this is not reinventing, this is not anything innovative. I mean, you really think that giving bank guarantees at the expense of the taxpayer to private companies or passing them direct subsidies is something new that hasn't been tried before in the last 100 years? And I don't know if anyone's noticed in this chamber a recent legislative audit of the Economic Development Authority where they somehow lost tens of millions of dollars loaning taxpayer money to companies not even located in West Virginia. And now we're going to expand this program by an order of magnitude. I mean, that's the purpose of this amendment, is to somehow try to limit the exposure of the taxpayer to these programs that we know from studying sound economics simply don't work. That's the purpose of this amendment. It's actually a moderate amendment, just holding the line at the $50 million number. That's it. I ask for the ayes and nays.
For what purpose does the gentleman on the 29th, Doug Steele, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I thought I'd hit my button and I hadn't. I know the gentleman's closed. I was wanting to speak on the amendment, and I guess it's kind of up to him. If it helps him, I agree with him. But if the House would let me.
Are there objections to the gentleman from the 29th being recognized to speak on the bill or on the amendment?
I would move it then, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 29th moves that debate be reopened on the primary amendment. Those in favor of that motion will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. No. Noes appear to have it. All right. Okay, noes have it. Roll call vote on the amendment was demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Question is on the primary amendment. Those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 20 ayes, 79 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares the primary amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2382, authorizing the Department of Environmental Protection to promulgate a legislative rule related to ambient air quality standards.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Hansen and others move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hansen et al. 3-11.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman from the 51st, Delegate Hansen, is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is a rules bundle. Even though the title of the bill talks about air quality standards, it includes several rules, including a water quality standards rule. And my amendment focuses on water quality standards. And in particular, this rule is related to human health criteria, which are the amount of pollutants allowed in our rivers and streams to protect human health. Yesterday, we had a long debate on the Above Ground Storage Tank Act, and there was, in my opinion, legitimate disagreement about how harmful those pollutants may be. But this rule, there should be no disagreement that the pollutants at issue are toxic, many of them cause cancer, and in fact, that's why the rules have human health criteria, because we need to limit the amount in our rivers and streams so that we could keep drinking water clean for West Virginians. So, with that background, here's what the amendment does. The rule, as before the body, makes updates to 24 of our water quality standards. And it's good that we're updating our standards because many of these have not been updated for decades, and there's new data and there's a new science. In 2015, the federal EPA came out with recommendations for updates. But this rule only adopts 24 of those recommendations. About half of those changes become more stringent, and about half become less stringent. So my amendment does two things to adjust that. First, it expands the number of pollutants from the 24 in the current rule to include updates to all of our human health criteria for which EPA provided recommendations, not just the 24 that were selected and approved by a lobbying organization and given the go-ahead. If it's good enough for those 24 to use the EPA updates, let's use the EPA updates for all of our standards in West Virginia rules. So that's the first part of the amendment. The second part of the amendment is really a policy choice for us here in this body. Like I mentioned, the current rule makes about half the criteria more stringent and half less stringent. So what my amendment does is it only adopts the new ones that are more stringent. It doesn't relax any of the criteria that are less stringent. And I just think that's the right thing to do, but I think it's also what the Clean Water Act contemplates. I'm going to read a phrase from the very start of the Clean Water Act. This is the act that we're operating under for these rules. It is the national goal that the discharge of pollutants into the navigable waters be eliminated. That's the national goal. And I wanted to give you a second to think about what the timeline should be on that elimination of pollution into our rivers and streams. Because the last part of that sentence says the discharge of pollutants be eliminated by 1985. 1985 is when we should have already eliminated the discharge of these toxic pollutants. So think about whether it's okay to increase the amount of toxic pollutants and carcinogens when the goal is to actually eliminate them. Now, we've made great progress across the state of West Virginia since the Clean Water Act was adopted. I know the Mon River in my county is much cleaner than it was. The Ohio River has made great strides. Even small rivers and streams like Indian Creek have shown great improvements. And one reason for these improvements is through the adoption of water quality standards and the commitments by manufacturers and other dischargers to meet those more stringent standards. We should celebrate that. We should appreciate that. And we should build upon that success, because we can protect human health while supporting our economy. That's what this amendment is about. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would ask for the yeas and nays and the right to close. Thank you.
The question before the House is the primary amendment just explained by the gentleman from the 51st. The gentleman from the 35th, Dr. Capito, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To my friend from the 51st, I have great admiration for your knowledge on this issue, and I concede that you probably have more knowledge in this regard than I do. But what I do know enough to know is that I don't know everything, and I like to rely on those experts that know the most about a subject matter. And in this case, I would like to rely on the science that has been brought before us, that we heard in testimony in committee, that the DEP has testified to not only before the committees in the Senate, but also in the House. And last year, we actually took what I would call a toe in the water approach. DEP came to us and said they wanted to study the issue a little longer because we're taking these matters this seriously. Now, I don't think anybody in this chamber would argue how important clean water is. I think we all want clean water for our families and for our children. And so the EPA has studied the issues of discharge. Our DEP has studied this issue. In fact, we took a whole nother year to study this issue. And I think it's really important that we listen to the scientists. And I know my friend is very learned in this space. But we've had hundreds of scientists on a national level that have been studying these limits. They've been studying the effects of these various chemicals that we're talking about. They know a lot more than I do. I think they know probably more than most of us do. And what they've recommended to us, we've taken their advice. And we've also taken it slowly. We're only adopting 24 changes here. I think the total amount of recommended changes was 94 from the U.S. So we're starting with these first 24. We're taking a toe in the water approach. We've done so responsibly. We're only loosening where the EPA has told us we can loosen. And we've certainly tightened where they'd recommended we tighten. I urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment because I think in this case we need to follow the science. Thank you.
The lady from the 51st, Dr. Fleischauer, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's really interesting that we are opening our arms to the opinions issued by DEP today, but we didn't like it yesterday. And I would point out the gentleman from the 35th and I both serve on the rulemaking committee. We have been studying these issues since about 2015. Every single year there's a new reason for us to study them. One year it was because West Virginians were fatter than the rest of the country and we could absorb more of these chemicals. And if you look at the amendment, which I urge you to do, you will see that some of the chemicals that we are limiting include cyanide. That is the one that popped out to me when the bill first came before us in rulemaking review, dioxin and benzene. And there are a lot of others there that most of us are not very familiar with because of their chemical names. We don't know about them. But if you really think that it's good to increase the amounts of these deadly poisons, vote yes. I'm going to be voting no.
Is there further debate on the amendment? The gentleman from the 66th, Douglas Espinosa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to our discussions, I would like a ruling under Rule 49. While the amendment before us, I believe, strictly deals with water standards, the underlying bill does regulate or pertain to air quality standards. As we've discussed, my employer must comply with all state and federal air quality regulations. So for that reason, I would ask whether I should be excused from voting.
The gentleman is correct. Pursuant to our conversation, as the set of facts, under the set of facts described by the gentleman, it would be the ruling of the chair. The gentleman does belong to a class of 5 or greater individuals, and therefore is directed to vote on both the amendment today and the bill on third reading. The lady from 51st, Doug Fleischower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want you all to vote yes on the amendment, no on the bill.
Gentleman 15th, Doug Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also serve on that Rules Committee, and we got a lot more information in there about this bill. If you would care to look at the website, look up the rule. It also has 720 pages of public comments, which I read the majority of those as well. But what we want to look at, too, is there's different standards. There's the A and C, which is the easiest way to describe is consumption of fish is C, and the consumption and drinking water is your A standard, which West Virginia is entirely under an A standard because we've decided to make our streams the higher standard. Every stream and water source in the state of West Virginia is drinking water standards. So West Virginia is already at a higher stance than everybody else. And I just want to point out the fact that these 96 standards haven't been adopted by any states. I want to point that out because and as the gentleman mentioned, taking a toe in the water approach, this is something that was studied specifically for West Virginia. The consumption studies that were done are 20 years old. And the most common, what do you think the most common fish that was studied? Well, it was shrimp and salmon. I haven't caught any shrimp or salmon in our streams or waters, and that's because the EPA study is not specific to West Virginia. So that's part of the objection to the water quality standards that were proposed by the EPA. So now there's been a third-party study done with DEP. Also, I'll mention most of those are 20 years old. And the studies done, though the disagreements of whether we should study shrimp and salmon versus trout is something that has been raised as an objection. But on top of that, there is agreement on these 24 standards among the scientists that study these, DEP and a third-party researcher who did these studies as well, reviewing research that was more recent and more effective to West Virginia, not the entire country. And I'll point out that even any of the states that have adopted some of these standards have made modifications to them. And that's what we're doing here is, as the gentleman mentioned, a toe-in-the-water approach to make sure we're cautious before we decide to either cause problems for industry, such as some of these standards that the gentleman put in this code aren't even measurable. We don't even have devices to measure to the amount. It would be as if I asked you, how many nanograms do you weigh? Do you know? And that's the whole point, is we're trying to make sure that these are not only testable and provable, but also that they're specific to West Virginia. And I'll remind you that these are studies, the ones that are proposed, the 24 are proposed by our DEP that has specific interest in our state. So I would urge rejection of the amendment and approval of the bill.
Gentleman the first, Dr. Zateslow, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to echo the comments, the gentleman from the 35th and the gentleman from the 15th. We've come a long way in this state, and we have a long way to go. It's not over, and it's not going to be over for some time. I'm proud of the state. I'm proud of what the state has done. I particularly commend the DEP for their measured, thoughtful approach to the standards. They actually were very conservative in their assessments. The standard is based on fish consumption, and our fish consumption is half of the national average. They chose to use the national average for these 24 standards. It's very prudent, and they still kept any increases or decreases to the 22-gram standard. I think it's prudent. I think it's conservative. They follow the science. They'll continue to follow the science with the remainder of the parameters on the list, and we will follow suit. The state of West Virginia is a state that has much better water quality than most states I can think of. We need to continue that, and it's a measured, long march. Let's continue it, and let's pass this bill as it is, rather than amending it right at this time. Thank you.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the gentleman from the 51st to close debate on the primary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to address a few of the points that were raised. One is the point was asserted that no other states have adopted the EPA recommendations from 2015, and that's simply not true. Our neighboring state of Ohio has adopted all 94. I'm not even suggesting that we adopt all 94. I'm suggesting we adopt those for which we already have standards in place and update those if they become more stringent. The second thing I would like to address is the 720 pages of public comment. If you flip through those 720 pages, you'll see that virtually all of those pages oppose the rule as proposed and would prefer to have these more stringent criteria and would prefer not to backtrack. One of the challenges with these types of rules is that there's always new data and there's always new science, right? And so where do you draw the line and put it in the rule? And what I suggest is that if we have calculations that were done in 2015 that update a lot of these standards that hadn't been touched for decades, let's go with those. People who are opposed to this amendment are okay with going with those for the 24 parameters. Let's go with those for all the parameters. Let's not pick and choose just because the lobbying group has given their go-ahead. And then finally, to the question of whether it's okay to strengthen some but not weaken others. Again, this is a policy question. The DEP has punted on that. When that issue has been brought up in the stakeholder committee, their answer has been that's a policy question for the legislature. That's not a question for the people running the numbers and doing the calculations. That's a policy question. Is it good policy to weaken standards for toxic pollutants, including carcinogens? My amendment would not do that, and that's why I'm asking for your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 51st did demand a roll call vote on the amendment. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House is the adoption of the primary amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the primary amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 24 ayes, 75 nays, and one member absent or not voting. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2682 relating to the issuance of license suspensions to insurance producers and insurance adjusters who have failed to meet continuing education requirements.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2758 requiring the insurance commissioner to regulate professional bondsmen.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2763 creating West Virginia cyber incident reporting.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2770 including home confinement officers in definition of law enforcement officers.
Are there amendments? Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to move to third with the right to amend.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that committee substitute for House Bill 2770 be advanced to third reading with the right to amend. Are there objections? There are no objections. The bill will be so advanced. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2788 expiring funds to the unappropriated surplus balance from state excess lottery revenue fund.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2789, supplementing and amending the appropriations to public defender services.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2802, supplementing and amending the appropriations of public monies out of the Treasury from the balance of monies remaining as an unappropriated surplus balance in a state fund general revenue to the Department of Homeland Security Division of Emergency Management.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2803, supplementing and amending the appropriations of public monies out of the Treasury from the balance of monies remaining as an unappropriated surplus balance in the State Fund General Revenue to the Department of Commerce Division of Forestry.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2804, expiring funds to the unappropriated surplus balance in the State Fund General Revenue for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2891.
Lady of the 49th.
Creating minimum statutory standards for law enforcement officers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the bill be postponed one day.
Lady from the 49th moves that the bill be postponed one day. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The bill is postponed one day. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2916, creating the Semi-Quincentennial Commission for the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2932, protections for charitable organizations.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2688, allow county political parties to have building funds in a similar manner that state parties are allowed.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2702, to require all public high school students to complete and submit a fee for application for federal student aid FAFSA prior to graduation.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2705, authorizing the Department of Health and Human Resources to promulgate a legislative rule relating to food establishments.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2785, relating to public school enrollment for students from out of state.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2797, declaring certain claims to be moral obligations of the state.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2834, adding the curator of the West Virginia Division of Arts, Culture, and History as an ex officio voting member of the commission.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2877, expand direct health care agreements beyond primary care to include more medical care services.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2969, to clarify the procedures for the sale and operation of a municipally owned toll bridge by a private toll transportation facility.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2972, allowing a person to manufacture a stated amount of alcoholic liquor for personal consumption.
The bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleague, Delegate Dean.
Are there objections to a leave being granted? There are no objections. Leave of absence shall be granted. Introduction of guests. Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 56th, Delegate Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent by the remarks from the lady from the 51st, Delegate Fleshire, during remarks by members be placed in the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections? There are no objections. Are there other miscellaneous business? If not, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Friday, March 12th.
Are there announcements?
Yes.
Gentleman the 10th. Yes, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet at 10:45 in the morning in House Education.
Gentleman the 10th, Delegate Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet tomorrow, March 12th, in the House chamber at 9 a.m. The agenda will be posted. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman of the 13th, Delegate Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 1 p.m. in the House chamber. The agenda is posted. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the Legislative Oversight Commission on Education Accountability, LOCIA, will meet tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in Senate Finance. It is imperative that members of LOCIA attend so we can have a quorum. Those members are Dr. Ellington, myself, Delegate Anderson, Delegate Hanna, Delegate Statler, and Delegates Doyle. So, thank you.
Gentleman, 30-second, Delegate Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on Judiciary will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the committee room, and the agenda will be posted.
Gentleman, the 15th, Delegate Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Government Organization Committee, given that we're the best committee in here and appreciate our members more than anybody else, lunch will be provided in the Government Organization Committee room for all members of our committee.
Gentleman, the 17th, Delegate Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet today at 1 p.m. Again, 1 p.m. in the Government Organization room. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Those members wishing to be appointed to GovOrg should consult the chair immediately afterwards. Gentleman, the 10th, Delegate Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet today at 3 p.m. in the House chambers. The agenda is posted.
Gentleman, the 16th, Delegate Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning in the House chamber, and the agenda will be posted.
Gentleman, the 12th, Delegate Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been asked by the cafeteria staff downstairs that they are open. A lot of people don't know they are. Breakfast from 7:30 to 9:30 and lunch from 10:30 to 1. They're afraid they're going to shut down again if they don't get some business. So if you want a hot meal, they're downstairs. So thank you.
Lady, the 38th, Delegate Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans will caucus today at 4 p.m. in the House chamber. Republicans will caucus today, 4 p.m. in the House chamber.
Gentleman, the 3rd, Delegate Fluharty is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats will caucus in room 252 immediately following floor session. The Doyview game will be provided as well as food. Thank you very much.
Are there other announcements? If not, the question before the House is the motion that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is adjourned at 11 a.m. tomorrow.